Here we go again. It's March Madness time. The most chaotic, exhilarating, and for many, financially devastating sporting event America has to offer. Every year, millions of people get caught up in filling out their brackets, placing bets, and hoping for that one big win that'll change everything for them. What started as a fun tradition of watching college basketball and making friendly bets has evolved into something much bigger today. And unfortunately, much more dangerous. It's no longer just an office pool or a $10 bet with your friend. Now, it's legal sports books, endless betting options, and people risking thousands of dollars without ever realizing that the odds were stacked against them from the start. In fact, my worst gambling memory was back in 2018 during March Madness, but more on that later. For those outside the US who might not be familiar, March Madness is an annual college basketball tournament featuring 68 teams in a high-stakes, single-elimination format. Over the course of a few weeks, the field is narrowed down until one team emerges as the national champion. It's a time of incredible moments, buzzer beaters, Cinderella stories, underdog wins. But for many, it's not just about the game anymore. It's about the money. Before widespread legalization, betting on March Madness was a little more difficult. You either had to go through a bookie or make small bets with your friends and family. Now, thanks to online sportsbooks, you can place a bet in seconds. People aren't even watching the games anymore. They're just glued to their phones tracking their bets, checking on their 37-leg parlays and chasing after that next big win. The sportsbooks have made sure that there is always something to bet on. In fact, according to the American Gaming Association, Americans are anticipated to wager $3 billion this year. If you can imagine a bet that you want to make, then you can very likely make it on one of the
full of exclusive games.
Many sports books.
$200 instantly.
That are constantly
Your casino is always with you.
advertising to you. Back in 2018, March Madness was what sent me into debt from gambling for the very first time. Now, for those of you that are seeing me for the first time, my name's Rob, and I'm in recovery from a gambling addiction. I made my last bet November the 12th of 2022, but the very first time that I went into debt was back in 2018, when UMBC, the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, took on Virginia in March Madness. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with the tournament, the 16 seed, which was UMBC in this case, had never previously beaten the 1 seed. In 2018, though, they did. As a problem gambler, what I've come to find in retrospect, that the only thing worse for me than losing a bet was not making a bet that I thought was obvious, or I would have won. Now, it definitely wasn't obvious that this would happen, but I was so frustrated from missing out on the big upset that year that I took UMBC to win the next round, because once again, they were underdogs to Kansas State. And unfortunately, reality caught up to them in that second round, and they were eliminated from the tournament, and I was sent into a terrible financial situation as a result. Briefly following that, I had to tell my family for the very first time that I went into debt as a result of my gambling. I didn't say I was addicted to it, I said I made some mistakes, even though already 1 year into my gambling at that point as a 19-year-old, I was fully addicted to it. Now, if you've ever feel like you've gambled too much money, then this might be the page for you. I want you to smash that subscribe button because I share stories like this in an effort to help you avoid making the same mistake with your life that I made with mine. But let's get back into the story here and let's talk numbers. I want you to take a second and guess what percentage of people correctly predict all 4 teams that make it to the Final Four of this tournament. Think about it. Do you have your answer? Well, whatever you guessed, you're probably wrong, because it's actually less than 1%. Less than 1% of people who fill out a bracket predict the Final Four correctly. And yet every year, millions of people convince themselves that this year is their year, and that they have this secret formula to beat the system. Unfortunately, they don't. In 2014 alone, over $2.72 billion was wagered on the NCAA tournament. That's more than double what was bet on the Super Bowl. And as mentioned this year, it's going to be even more. And let's be real. March Madness is 67 games spread out over several weeks. That means more betting opportunities, more chances to chase losses, and more ways for sportsbooks to make money off of you. And speaking of money, let's talk about the NCAA itself, because they generate $1.3 billion annually, and most of that actually comes from March Madness. Not the gambling revenue, the tournament itself, the broadcasting rights, sponsorships, ticket sales. It's a money-making machine. Then there's the influencers and scammers who capitalize on this event too. Dave Portnoy is a great example. In 2014, he put down $600,000 on UConn to win the tournament. And guess what? He won $2.16 million, calling it the greatest bet of his life. And of course, because he's Dave Portnoy, he made sure that everyone knew about it. Now, here's the problem. Most people watching don't have $600,000 to throw on a game. But when they see wins like that, it creates this false sense of confidence in their ability to win. It makes them believe that if they just make the right bet, they too can be a winner. But the reality is that most people don't win. They lose. And they lose a lot. And no matter what, if you keep gambling, you'll lose anyway. And that point is what brings us to something that you probably didn't know, but is actually the main point of me making this video today. March is Problem Gambling Awareness Month. Makes sense, right? This is the time of year when people spiral the hardest. Yet, instead of seeing ads about gambling addiction and where to get help, you're bombarded with the flashy promotions, promising you a huge payday. Risk-free bets, boosted odds, parlay multipliers. Let's be honest, if these bets were really risk-free, the sportsbooks wouldn't be offering them. I know this because I fell for it too. March Madness was supposed to be fun, but for me, it became an absolute obsession, as I told you earlier. I was glued to the games. I was convinced that I could beat the system, that my next bet was going to be the big one that fixed all the problems I was creating with the gambling. But by the end, I wasn't even watching the games anymore. I was just looking at my phone, tracking every play, sweating over every missed shot. Every year from 2018 until I quit gambling, I lost way more than I could afford to during this tournament. I honestly don't even like college basketball. I mean, in a standard game, you're watching maybe one future NBA player and 9 future accountants going back and forth. I guess I'm getting off track now. March Madness stops being fun when gambling takes over. When the excitement of the game is replaced with the anxiety of losing too much money, are you even enjoying it anymore? For me, I reached a point where I secretly hated March Madness. Not because of the games, but just because of what I had turned into as a result. It wasn't about the sport anymore, it was only about the money, the addiction. And if you're feeling like that, you're not alone. A lot of people are trapped in this cycle, despite what the media might be reporting, and millions are going through it in complete silence. If any of this sounds familiar, I made the perfect video for you so that you don't have to go through this alone. I've created a full guide on how to quit gambling. If you found yourself losing too much money or feeling bad about your gambling this March, watch this video next, and let's get better together one day at a time.